Thank you very much for coming here. I will be focused on behavioral biometrics, not biometrics in general terms, but behavioral ones, especially in mobile scenarios. I've been working in this topic. I started in the 90s doing speaker identification and then face recognition and so on. But now I'm focused on behavior biometrics. This is our team. It's not as big as being here in this very prestigious university as you are. But this is our team, former guys also, and special thanks to Julián Ferrer, Rubén Vera, and Aitami Morales. Well, I will do an introduction to biometrics for those of you who are not used to it. Some words on biometrics in access control scenarios, authentication in online application, and cognitive biometric authentication, and then I will focus on some behavioral traits, biometric behavioral traits, like handwriting, graphical passwords, keystroking, mouse dynamics, and swiping. Some challenges, and then the future trends and conclusions. Then perhaps we can start a discussion on the topics. What is biometrics? It is the use of biological, physiological, or behavioral characteristics to automatically authenticate in pseudo-real time the identity of an individual based on previous personal information. So perhaps at this moment DNA is not a fully automated biometric authentication for civil application, and it is for forensic applications. So this is the reason of using this pseudo-real-time term. It comes from bio and metric, and these characteristics must be unique to individuals, so we can verify or identify a person. This, you know this very well, the authentication paradigm, which is based on knowledge, something that the user knows, like a password or a PIN, token-based, something that the user has, like a smart card or a credit card, and also biometrics-based, something the user is or produce. So this in my view, in the biometric community, this is known to be the closing of the authentication paradigm. Okay. You can see here the difference between being something or producing something. You have a fingerprint, but you don't have speech. You produce speech. So this is the reason of this difference. This is the biometric market from 2013 to 2020. You see the growth is very high, and more or less this is how the use of different traits is in the market. It was in 2015 in the market. Now, fingerprint and AFIS. AFIS is also fingerprint devices. It's very, very important, but it is being less and less important from a relative point of view. Okay, face is 15%, iris 16%, vein recognition 10%, voice speech, speaker 13%, signature 10%, and others which are growing and growing nowadays, these others. Okay. I will take basically on this, which is a small part, but in my view it is very important, okay? Because for online application it is very important. We always make the difference between verification systems and identification systems. Verification is one-to-one systems, okay? Am I who I claim to be? So there must be a claim, and then you verify the claim is correct or not. Okay? This is verifying identity. Okay, so there is a match or no match as an output, and you must threshold in any way, okay, the score that the system is producing. You have to put a threshold and then decide whether the user is or not who he claims to be, he or she claims to be. Or identification. Who am I? Okay. The answer is an identity, such a name or ID number, and it is also known as a one-to-many problem. Okay? Think about an automated fingerprint identification system in forensic scenarios. That is an an identification system. You put your fingerprint, and the system, okay, makes a full search in the data set. Okay? If I use my phone, okay, with my fingerprint here, I am verifying the one-to-one identity. Okay, so that's it. What about the traits and the types of traits? There are the physiological or morphological traits, like fingerprints, face in any other spectral bands, like thermography, iris, which is the color part of the eye, ear, retinal scan, which is the back part of the eye, hand and finger geometry, just the geometry, blood vessel imaging. This is taking more and more importance, blood vessel imaging, and body profile, body parts. Okay, this is physiological, morphological. Biological traits, DNA, all kinds of EEG, EKG, okay, other measures, for instance, and behavioral traits, like speaking, handwriting and signature, gait recognition. Enrique is working on that topic recently. Keystroking. Okay, mouse dynamics, swiping, gesture, all kind of, many of these are neuromotor based biometrics, and I will talk about that specifically. Okay, I will focus on some of these traits in this talk. What are the characteristics? These must be universal, unique, permanent, and you must, or you may collect them. Otherwise, you cannot use them in engineering systems. What are the criteria at a system level? The performance, in terms of accuracy, speed, and robustness. The user acceptance. People are willing to accept it. And the resistance to circumvention and fake mutation. Okay, what we nowadays know as presentation attack detection, PAD. How easy is it to fool the system by fraudulent methods? This is more or less the block system of a full biometric recognition system. Okay. Here you have the sensor with which you take the trait, okay, sensors, sensings, video camera, fingerprint sensor, whatever. Here you extract the information and you basically do the pre-processing stage at this point. You extract the feature vector, and here you have the classifier. And then, once you have the matching score, you can negotiate the output of the system in terms of thresholding and acceptance or rejection, okay, for a final decision. Basically, we know these blocks, these initial blocks are the enrollment part of the system, and these are the training parts of the system, for the full system. Okay. What are the performance metrics? For a verification system, normally we talk about type 1 error or false rejection. A genuine user is rejected. Type 2 error or false acceptance. An imposter is accepted. And you have these distributions here, false rejection and false acceptance. Okay? These distributions are they complement one another. If you want to reduce one of them, the other will increase. So you have to cope with this problem. Okay? And you have a threshold. This is the system threshold. It depends on what you really want your system to work with. Okay? And how do we express this? Normally in terms of rock plots here, in which you have the type 1 error versus type 2 error. And normally we use also the depth plots, in which, as you see, these are normal distribution scales. So the performance of the systems in terms of every single threshold you can put is expressed in terms of these plots. Okay, so you can use just one number, the equal error rate, where FA equals FR. Okay, so this equal error rate is found here, exactly here, here and here for these two plots. Okay, if you want to use just one number as your metric for the system performance, but basically, if you want to show how is your system performing, you may use the full picture, which is the full plot. This is the funny part of the thing, the biometric zoo, or the menagerie, the way of categorizing users. Okay? This is, it is also known as the Doddington Zoo. George Doddington is a NIST, he works in NIST. What is this biometric zoo? Well, it depends on the type of user you are. Okay? For instance, sheep are good for recognition. The most of the population is doing usual things. So we are sheep. Goats, they are difficult to recognize. People who is especially difficult to recognize in a given trait. Lambs, very similar one from another, easy to imitate, for instance. Wolves, great imitators, and so on. There is a large zoo menagerie in terms of how you categorize users. This is the classical use of biometrics in the last, let's say, for civil applications, not for forensic applications, in the last 20 years. Access control. It has been the main use and the main scenario for biometric using of the technology. Okay? The user is physically present, so it's an in situ scenario. No need for additional actions. You just put your fingerprint or just show your face and go through the system. There is a checkpoint. Once checked, the access is granted. Okay. And if denied, if your system is not matching your fingerprint, there should be a human supervision of the problem. Okay, go to the police or whatever. Okay, for human supervision. In general terms, morphological modalities have been used in these scenarios, and they show better, they are better adapted to these problems, okay? Because they are universal, fingerprints are, for instance, or face is universal, low variability, easy of use, transparency, okay? You don't have to do many specific actions to show your face, okay? Just go through. Okay. But what if you don't have this kind of scenarios? I'm not going to talk about these scenarios. These are classical scenarios for biometrics. Because there are some challenges. For instance, interoperability is a huge challenge for fingerprints, for instance. Okay? You have been collecting fingerprints in the last 20 years with sensors which are not longer in the market. Even that specific technology is no longer in the market. So you have a real problem of interoperability, because perhaps your database contains millions of people. Okay, so that's a huge problem. The quality, okay, because for instance in fingerprint or in face or in iris, quality is a topic, is an issue. Okay. The long-term stability, the aging problem. What about face when after 1, 2, 5 years, okay, face is aging, clearly it's aging, it's changing. Invasiveness. If you want to take the iris, it is very invasive. Okay, you have to go to put your eye and so on. Important problem. No, they are irrevocability. Your, let's say, your fingerprint is always there. You cannot change that. Okay, it's not like a password you can change. Okay, your fingerprint you cannot change it. Or your face. And there are presentation attacks and impersonation. And of course, data protection, legal and ethical issues. Okay? So these are the main topics, the main issues regarding the in situ applications, the classical biometric applications. Okay? What if we think about online scenarios? Should we use the same way biometrics if we are in online scenarios? If we are using our computer or cell phone? Should we use biometrics in the same way? No. Okay? This is some news in Spanish newspaper. These are the 10 passwords more used in the world. You know that. 1, 2, 3, hello world, and so on. Those are the 10 more used passwords. Okay? So there is a need for user authentication in online remote scenarios, for both web-based desktop and mobile scenarios. Basically, the authentication nowadays is based on user and password settings, and the user is not physically present. You cannot check the user. You cannot say, okay, please come here, please do this. You cannot do that. And it is difficult to supervise by humans, all the online process. So we have to shift to use different biometric traits, not the traditional ones, okay? And these are the, you know this well, the password hacking contest. Even if your password is very complicated, if you have brute force possibilities to attack the password, you can do that. Okay? So I'm going to talk in these online scenarios about human-device interaction, HDA. The user is monitored, connected at least for several minutes. It's not only that you are entering, but you are staying in the system. Not only for security applications, it's not only a matter of security checking, but also a matter of user convenience. Okay? And human-device interaction is rich in terms of human activity and behavioral patterns. Okay? It is rich in those terms. If you are able to model those activity patterns, you will have a lot of information about the individual. For instance, these systems are based on keystroking, mouse dynamics, online handwriting and signature, graphical passwords, swipe and gesture biometrics, speech, and gait. We are not going to talk about speech and gait because we will focus on HDI in cell phone applications, okay? Speech is not basically a neuromotor HDA, and I will focus on neuromotor ones. And gait is not basically an HDA trait. So I won't be talking about this, but I will focus on the green traits. What about these human activity patterns? Okay, iris or face is not a human activity pattern itself, but if you think about handwriting, or if you think about keystroking, those are human activity patterns. Are clearly learned from we are child. Okay, children are used to start speaking, start drawing. We do that naturally. It's not something which is cultural, but it is very natural to human beings to speak and to draw. It's very natural. As pattern, they are stable and reproducible, even if they are subject to variability. We have to cope with variability problems, but they are stable. Okay, when we speak, we always recognize a given guy if he's familiar to us, or we can understand what you are writing or what you are typing. Okay. Of course, there is a neuromotor coordination of gestures and movements, but continuous identity monitoring is possible. You can always go on, okay, and check whether the guy is there or not. Perhaps you entered the system and there was an identity change afterwards. Okay, you can check that from a continuous identity checking in that sense. The user is active. You can ask the user to do specific actions. Okay, you can prompt the user to do something if you want. Okay, and there could be a multi-level strategy, from dynamic systems to emotions, okay, to context, to habits, to estilometry, to experience. This means that human activity patterns are not only for security applications, but also, of course, for all kind of applications, including this kind of information. Like, for instance, medical applications or user experience applications, okay, retail marketing, and so on. Okay. So this is very interesting from this point of view. We are not only talking about security applications. We are talking about how can we extract information from user interaction with the device, okay, for other kind of applications, not only for security applications. Of course, these activity patterns, subject to variability, are not fixed patterns, okay, like fingerprints. Even if you have some variability in fingerprint recognition, but those are patterns, okay, that may change a little bit, but those are patterns. Here, you are more with statistical models. You have to face this problem from a statistically modeling problem. So, what we call cognitive biometric applies to this kind of problems. Okay, so this is the point what I want to share. Oh, sorry. In fact, DARPA, for our active authentication of a user puts this pyramid in which the physical aspects of you are in the base, but then if you go up, how you behave, behavior, what is your context, and what are your experiences, okay? To be able to authenticate from an active point of view is not only what is your physical aspect, but also your behavior, your context, and finally your experiences. You have to go through this kind of topics and of problems. Another advantage is that for human-device interaction, you may use the sensors that you already find in those devices, okay? That is what we call transparency. You don't have to go for very specific sensors. You can use microphones, you can use video cameras, and you can use of course, tactile screens, okay? And you can use all the devices that a cell phone has inside, okay? From all these points of view. So this is quite transparent. You don't have to put extra sensors on the system. What are the pros of behavioral patterns? It permits transparent authentication. You don't have to make the user aware that you are authenticating him because he's keystroking or he is speaking. Okay, it is transparent. While he or she is doing that, you can authenticate he or she. Okay. You can use existing input channels like keystroking or handwriting or mouse dynamics. You may include other sources of variability, like the sensor he is using, the session, into the behavior pattern. It is more robust to sensor interoperability. Okay, I said that, for instance, fingerprint, when we are doing fingerprint matching, we have a big problem with interoperability. And here the problem is less important. Okay, because normally you include a kind of channel normalization into the system. For instance, speech guides for speaker ID, we have always included channel normalization from the very beginning. Okay, so we cope with the problem of channel in terms also of sensor from the very beginning of pre-processing stage. These behavioral patterns are more robust to quality changes. Okay, for instance, if you think about handwriting or keystroking, it is difficult to think about quality problems in the nowadays in the capturing of the signals. Those are quite standard in terms of quality. Okay, and this is very important. They are fully revocable. Okay, if you use speech as a password, you can change that. Or handwriting as a password, you can change that. Okay, or keystroke, you can change that. Your pattern can be changed. Okay. You may incorporate what we call soft biometrics. Okay, soft biometrics are traits which may not identify one person, but may categorize people, like gender, or handedness, or language, or ethnical issues. Okay, you can categorize people more or less, and this is important. For instance, in speaker ID, there is always a characterization of male, female. All good systems, they do this previous characterization. Because if you are able to characterize, more or less, okay, the system will work better, okay? You characterize the users, and then you do it better for every different, let's say, set of users. And it is easy of use and higher user acceptance. Okay. Some people is okay. I won't go into this. We can discuss it afterwards. Okay. Now I will focus on some of these traits and make you know how we face these problems. Online signature verification, but in general terms, think about handwriting on screens, okay? On all kinds of screens, okay? Of course, signature has always been used as a means of ID. You see here some examples, classical examples, normally on paper or paper-based, okay? But not only, like this. But I'm thinking about, of course, screen-based sensors. Modern device at least give you two of these time signals, which is X and Y. Of course, X and Y. In order to reproduce what you are handwriting, you have to have those two signals. But if your device is quite of higher quality, you may have pressure, instantaneous pressure, I mean. So you have the time signal, the full time signal. And in some cases, you can also have the azimuth and the altitude of the in each acquisition sample. Okay, so for a good device, here you have an example of handwriting and signature, and these are the specific 5 time signals. Okay, that cope or that include all this information. For instance, pressure information is very important. This signal is very important. It's very distinctive, okay, from one user to another. I will give you the slides, and here you have some references of some of our works and some other people's works relating every problem I am coping. Signature is one of the most socially accepted biometric traits. It's not only that they ask you to sign, but in many cases you want to sign something which is important for you. Okay? Have been used for centuries. The vast majority of commercial tablets and handheld devices, they have handwriting recognition capabilities. Think about not only handwriting with a stylus, you can handwrite with your fingertip, okay, and we are coping that problem also. It can coexist with traditional means of signing authentication. This is important. We can capture the in-air trajectories, okay. Some of these sensors are electromagnetic, and they are able to cope with the in-air trajectories. These trajectories have not a written correlation. You cannot see that part of the signature, but you are acquiring it. This is very important. And easily meets the privacy rule, for which the objective of identification and the means employed must be proportional. This is very important, and all the European regulations make this thing to be very important. There must be a proportion between the means employed and the objective of identification. Okay. In biometric in general terms. What are the general challenges of this specific trait? Aging, There is some aging in handwriting. You may change your signature in time. Ergonomy, that is a topic, of course, but it's not dramatic, let's say. You can. Interoperability, this is not very, very important. It's not a big impact on handwriting. Intra-user variability, yes. If you see, I will show you some examples, but we change a lot our handwriting, so there is a lot of intra-variability. This is one of the main topics in general terms in behavioral biometrics, the intra-user variability. Forgeries and mimicking, people can look how you write or can see how something is written and can reproduce that in any manner. We have to cope with these problems. All the huge data sets, European data sets or global data sets, they take into account the forgery problem, and they make other users or other people to mimic what you're writing, to mimic your signature. This is very important. Of course, sample data scarcity. This is not like video or audio traits which you may find in internet and tones of information, of video and audio. Handwritten, specifically signature, is very limited in terms of availability or scarcity. So there is a limited access to huge data collections. Some of the problems, you may see them in this quite old device, but you know, the lack of space, the stylus or the finger you use, ergonomics, standing position, you handwrite in standing position. Okay, these are the stages of the authentication process in general terms. Preprocessing, feature extraction, similarity computation with some models, score normalization, and decision threshold. What about pre-processing? If you have all these devices, you can pre-process in a universal manner, okay? There must be a size and tilt normalization. You can, for instance, compute the center of mass and just normalize by using that, okay? Scaling and normalizing that. There must be a pressure normalization, and you could resample if these devices sample at different rates. Okay, so we do that. We do a kind of plug and play universal pre-processing stage in which whatever the device is, what you have here is always in the same, coded in the same manner. So this is usually what we do in pre-processing. Feature extraction. Here you have, for instance, X, Y, pressure, and tilt, I think, okay, in the discrete time domain. These are samples, okay. Normally in handwriting, you use sampling frequencies of 100 to 200 hertz, okay, 200 samples per second. That's quite reasonable. So this is what you capture, and these are two traditional ways of extracting your feature information. Okay, this is from a holistic point of view, the global feature set. Okay, in which you take, these are global parameters. Okay, from 1 to 100 in terms of global parameters. Let's say global duration, number of pen-ups, or average speed, or average acceleration, okay? One after the other. And this is using the whole time sequences of the program, okay? For instance, our group was one of the very first to introduce this problem. Also, the Enrique's group in University of Vigo was also one of the very first that used time sequences, full time sequences, to model the process of handwriting. Okay, I will go a little bit, and you can see here in terms of death plots what if you use these time sequences from XY, pressure, the tilt information, okay, and how the equal error rate is being reduced, okay, this is EER, while you were using more and more time series to model that information for a given data set of users, okay. Here in particular, we are using a data set of 300 users with around 100 samples per user and 100 forgeries per user to have this global equal error rate numbers. You can see here that this best system is less than 1% equal error rate. This is about 0.5% equal error rate. What does it mean? This system, about 0.5. You can, I think it's not the white one, it's around here. It means that if you are doing 1,000 tests, genuine tests, 995 of the genuine will pass, okay, will be matched. But it also means that if you are doing 1,000 forgery tests, 995 are, 995 will be catched, okay? You will know that almost 99.5 of the attacks that you are performing will be catched, will be detected, okay? You are saying both things at the same time when you are using the ER feature. Okay, this is a basic structure, traditional structure of doing dynamic time warping and hidden Markov models. When you have full time sequences, if you have holistic vectors, then you go to pattern matching, traditional pattern metrics, of course, Euclidean or Mahalanobis or whatever. These are some examples of how you can do this with these two different approaches. And this is the results of the first competition that was set in 2004. It was the very first competitive scenario that was set up by, it was called the SBC 2004 competition, and our systems or HMM implementation was the best in casual impostor and the second best for skill forgeries. This was another evaluation campaign in 2009. Okay. Best systems here, depending on the data set. The Biosecure data set is one of the the biggest corpus, existing corpus in the. It was caught in a Biosecure European project, and I think it comprises more than 700 people. Okay, handwriting, and best systems here are about 2% equal error rate. Okay, our system is one of the best there. But of course, signatures can be forged. That is a problem I told you. A fingerprint is much more difficult to be forged, but a signature is quite easy to be forged. So here you have the no forgeries problem, and here you have the skilled forgeries problem. So if you just ask people to reproduce other people's samples, you can have a problem. I mean, you can reproduce other people's signature. Of course, for instance, what we do is we put a prize for the best attacking guy. So students are there for hours and hours and hours trying to be the best attackers, the best forgers. So you have very, very competitive data sets in that sense, okay? Because you have very good forgers. You can reproduce the signature. You can sign on the screen while the signature appears on the same dynamic process. And of course you can fuse that. You can fuse the global and the local approach. Okay? Fusion, like in fingerprint, best fingerprint algorithms are fusion of algorithms, are not single algorithms. Okay? Fusion of best approaches to the problem. This is the Biosecure dataset I told you. It is almost 700 donors with gender balance. It is publicly available with a very good age distribution, with 2 different signature devices and 2 sessions separated by months. Okay? And we have the worst case high quality forgeries because people could sign on the screen while the genuine signature was in a dynamic manner, was shown on the screen, and you could sign on that. So that is the worst case scenario. So we are using this kind of data sets. Here you have some examples of some forgeries. The green is the genuine, the red is the forgery. So you can see how people is attacking other people. But here, and this is quite state of the art. This is, we have a huge contract with some Spanish banks, and there is a banking association called SECA Bank. And these are the results of our nowadays system in real conditions with about 0.6% equal error rate, which is more or less the best fingerprint systems nowadays are around between 0.2% and 0.5%. That is the performance of the very good fingerprint systems nowadays. So we are there with a highly variable trait like signature. So this can be used in real applications like this banking application, in which users of a given bank can be authenticated to do some kind of operations. Okay, I will skip this. Of course, we are coping with the problem of fingerprint as a writing tool, fingertip as a writing tool. Okay, if you want to sign on the screen, many screens are not sensible to pressure, so you have to cope with that. You just have X and Y, and you have to cope with that. But in any case, we have excellent results in terms of EER for these programs. The problem of aging, I will skip this. Perhaps we can talk about this. The problem of aging signature, some examples of acquiring. You see here the problem of variability. This is always the same guy. These and these and these and these, and these are some imposters of that specific user. And some more results in that. I will skip this. What about signature modeling? Can we go to the neuromotor source to model what's going on there? Well, there are some models, some source models for reproducing handwriting, especially Professor Plamondon in Canada. He is one of the proposers of this sigma log norma modeling of all kind of handwriting process. And here you may see how this model applies. You see the original and the extracted one, and you see the original and how does the sigma log model adapt to the actual signature. It is a very well accurate system to model what's going on, and also to synthesize handwriting. Okay, you can use this as a source model to synthesize. In fact, this is a synthetic, automatic synthetic producer of signatures. Okay, you can go to this literature to see what's going on. Which of this is synthetic? Can you guess that? Can you look at this? Using this approach, the sigma log normal approach, can you know which of these is synthetic and which is actual real one? All those are synthetic. All the one with the red cross are synthetic. It's not that easy to understand and to know just by watching at that, to know which of those is synthetic. Okay? This is very interesting because synthetic data sets, if they perform like actual data, it's very interesting to produce huge data sets to settle the problem. Another problem is the problem of entropy or complexity. We have very different kind of signers. Okay, so this could be a simplified signature or Bisset signature, and this could be a very difficult. So we can if you characterize that in terms of entropy, you can do it better. If you can divide the problem, you will do it better. Divide and conquer, no? In the last 3 years, we've been also, of course, using deep learning into this problem of handwriting. It's not that easy because, as I told you, of data scarcity, specifically if you want to do signature recognition. It's not the case that you have huge amounts of data, okay, to train your system. So it's a problem because of data scarcity. But in any case, we are using recurrent neural networks. Basically, we've been using this long short-term memory and this gate recurrent unit. These kind of topologies are well adapted to time sequences. You have to take into account that handwriting is a time sequence. It's not an image. It's not. We are doing it an online basis. So these are time sequences. These long short-term memory topologies work very well for speech in general terms, and we have been using this to check whether, and also the bidirectional versions and the SciMS architecture, which is derived from these two architectures. What do we have? We have better results for the skilled problem. You can see here the skilled problem, we have better results, but we don't have better results for the random problem. We know it's a matter of the topology, but we haven't found a very good topology for handwriting, for the handwriting random process. For the skill process, you have much better results when using this kind of deep network approaches. Of course, we know if we have massive signature data, we could do it much better. These are some examples of how in the face recognition problem with massive data you can do it much better. But we have that problem of data scarcity. From this you can skip into what we call graphical passwords or draw a secret problem. Okay? You can see that from handwriting, signature, you can go to drawing easily. Just almost with using the same tools you have for signature, you can go for this kind of graphical passwords. Basically is what we've done, using the same kind of already developed technology. We have go to this different, let's say, problem, but always from the handwriting point of view. Okay? So from the source or from the nature of the problem, it's more or less the same source problem with different, of course, with different application. Okay? So this kind of graphical passwords, completely free. These are free graphical passwords. Okay? So it's a gesture-based authentication on touch screens. Okay. These are other proposals. This is the draw a secret one, but this is the pass and go. This is the pattern lock. This is the picture gesture authentication or the multi-touch gesture. Other graphical proposals, graphical password proposals. Okay, we are using this one in which you have completely freedom to do your own graphical password. Okay. So this is the how we took the data set for the freeform doodles. This kind of doodles, you see here several samples with the variability. You have it in here, and you have both doodles and pseudo signature or short signatures. You have genuine samples, and you have here forgeries. Why? Because it is easier to imitate a doodle than a signature, for instance. How do you know this is a forgery? You have to cope with that. Of course, we are not approaching the problem also only from the graphical point of view. Here I show you the graphic output. That's not the only thing we are looking. Okay, but of course you have a problem because these are very similar. And results go from 20% to 3-4%, which is, of course, a good result here. This is EER, but not comparable to signature because of the problem I told you. But it is easier to mimic a doodle than a signature. So if it is easier, you may attack it easier. Here, it is interesting, you have distributions. Green is random forgeries, blue is genuine users, and the dot red line is skilled forgeries. Okay? And you have here doodles, pseudo signature, and signatures, and you have here when only using XY position, when you add speed, first time derivative, and when you include acceleration. So this is more and more information, better and better system. These are different problems. What can you see here? That the skilled forgery distribution is very much overlap with the genuine distribution. It is very difficult to separate that if you only use X and Y. But if you include speed and acceleration, this distributions are not as much as overlap as in the first case. Here, you can more easily, okay, separate those populations. Some words on keystroke dynamics. It's a well-known behavioral biometric. There are different kinds of keyboards, keypads, physical ones, virtual ones. Okay, when we use our cell phones, it is of course virtual ones. They induce higher rates and stable performance. Perhaps a problem of interoperability by means of the keypad you are using, but it is easy of use, it is fully acceptable, it is very transparent, but while you are typing, you may identify who is typing. These are different scenarios. Some history, these were the telegraphists in the World War II. They could know who was the colleague on the other point of the network, on the telegraphy network. They were able to identify who was the guy by looking, by listening to the way the other telegraphy was doing his job. Okay? So it's not only a matter of what signs, what code you are producing, but also how do you do it from a personal point of view or an identification point of view. Okay? It is transparent, it is low cost. We all have these keystroking devices. Coursera is trying to do, and in general, online education platforms, they look at this kind of solution as very interesting because you are typing, so while you are typing, we can identify you. We can, if there is an examination or whatever, we can know if you are the guy who is supposed to be writing there. Okay, it's not only that you do a matching on the password and then a matching on the biometrics, but you could do all together. Okay, password and biometrics in the same action. In general terms, when you have time functions, you have to do a sequence alignment. Okay, this dynamic program, dynamic time working process is very effective in terms of time sequence alignment. We use it in speech, in handwriting. You may use it here because you have to align things, okay, from the time point of view. Keystroking is always basically based on timing between, okay, between keys or the intra-key timing. Okay, so you are doing a kind of timing maps of what's going on there. Not only on what key is the guy pressuring, but also what are the press time and release time, okay, and times between keys. So you make a time map between all those events. Here you have all those latencies, okay, of press and hold latencies, and you have to make a pattern with that. Okay, that's the main issue in keystroking. In order to compute similarity, you may use many techniques. We should be stopping. Okay, give me just 3 minutes and pick it up. You can use GMMs, for instance. I don't know if you are used to that kind of techniques, very well used in modeling time sequences in general terms. Okay, I will go, if we only have 3 more minutes, I will go to some results here. These are data sets, quite limited in terms of around 100 people, okay, when you want to, with 100 people. And then some results here, okay. This is Keybok is a competition, keystroking competition, accomplished 1.5 years ago. There were like 7 institutions participating, and you know, you have like around 5% equal error rate for the best system. 5%, 4-5%, it's quite acceptable in real systems, in actual systems. And I will stop here. If we don't have more time, perhaps in the discussion we have time to go. Because I had some information, this is keystroking on mouse dynamics, okay? We are doing also mouse dynamics. Okay, this is the classical problem is how to do a star with the how to draw a star with your mouse, and how that can be used to identify. Here you see how we cope with that. These are the strokes you are computing and the number of points. Okay, and how you can use that to identify what the user is doing. Movement between clicks. That's the other problem, but perhaps in the discussion we can do on that. And I think swipe and gesture biometrics. This is very recent. We are just looking at the horizontal and vertical movements. That's what we can do at the moment. Okay, you can use that for continuous ID monitoring with free interaction, while the end user is reading or viewing some images, and how these are the type of signals you can extract from that problem. As you see, this is user A to do this thing, so intra-variability is a huge problem in behavioral biometrics. You may see here clearly when you try to do this action for a given user, only one user, that specific action is realized in all these different ways of doing that. So you have to model that. I think, yes, I will stop here. Okay, I will stop here.
I think anyone can proceed with any question that you may have. They are very shy regarding biometrics.
So I have a question. What do you see as acceptable equal error rate? Because I mean, if you have something like 1% or 2%, then you have to implement backup mechanisms like that. Otherwise, users can just keep trying.
It depends on the application. It depends on what are you trying to monitor. Of course, if you are trying to, for instance, to do some kind of financial transactions, your EER must be 1. And if you just want to, I don't know, enter your cell phone, perhaps the EER could be another different. In general terms, the NIST, for instance, in '96, the American NIST declared that speaker ID was a major technology, and at that time we had about between 1 and 2% EER for that specific trait. So I think when you are above 97-98% of correct classification, you could declare that that technology is quite mature. But depends very much on the application. It depends very much on what you are trying to look for. Are you looking for security applications, for user convenience? If it's just user convenience, are you using biometrics alone Or are you using biometrics as other means of authentication? Okay, because you can, of course, mix and use other kinds of authentication. So it depends very much. There is no fixed number I can tell you in that sense, but more or less that's the idea. Yes.
Do you think for a security application it's fair to use, well, naive imposters? Because as soon as you were using skilled imposters, the equal error rates were very, very bad, actually.
Yeah. Well, this is also an interesting question. Signature is the only trait in which we use imposter, in which we use forgeries, skilled forgeries. Why? Because we understand it is quite easy that someone looks or sees or in any manner is able to reproduce your signature. So if you don't cope with that problem, you cannot develop applications. But in the rest of traits, we don't have imposters in general terms. We just look for when we look for the performance of the system, we are just measuring the confusibility of the system. One user against the other users, not forgers, but the other users of the system.
Another thing I was wondering is in terms of privacy, how acceptable is it to use soft biometrics in order to do some pre-profiling of the person you want to authenticate? How far can we go there? Can we, for example, only say gender and maybe age, or can we go to gender, age, ethnic backgrounds, language was one?
Depends very much on the application. For instance, as I told you, for instance, in speaker ID, you always do gender discrimination. And it is accepted that you do that. For face recognition, many algorithms do that. In terms of gender, and also in terms, perhaps, of ethnicity. Okay, Asian people, Caucasian people, African people, okay? But depends on what you want to cope with what is the kind of problem. Age, an aging problem, for instance, in face recognition, it's very important. And being able to classify, for instance, depends on the application, but perhaps you're using biometrics to enter adults applications. So you want to know if there are children. You can do that by doing face recognition, but also by handwriting, because you may know if there is a children on the other side. So depends on the application, but you can do very good things by doing that, by using soft biometrics. It helps a lot, but depends on the application. What do you need? What are you supposed to solve with that problem?
Okay. Another question? Well, so let's thank again Javier.
Thank you very much.